So you're thinking about buying a Jeep Cherokee and you just want to know what to look out for? Well, I'm going to do my best to list it because I work on quite a few of these. I own a couple of these, so I have some experience in it. This one happens to belong to a customer. I'm in here working on it. I'll give you a quick rundown of what we're doing to this one and the things you should look out for before you buy one, or if you already have one. From our extensive experience working on these Jeep 4-liter engines, we've learned a couple of common issues with them, and we try to address them every time a customer brings us one. The number one issue, which is a pretty easy one to address, is the oil filter housing adapter. It's just a small O-ring that goes behind a 90 or 45 degree adapter for the Cherokees that have this 4-liter engine. This adapter is not on the Wranglers with the same 4-liter engine. Another simple thing that we try to address every time we get one that comes our way is the valve cover gasket in these engines. Now, factory gasket is usually cork in all of our times that we've done this, and the cork has a tendency to flatten out in one spot, very often the back where the engine is the hottest. So we like to replace these gaskets with an upgraded gasket that is a rubber silicone design with a metal insert in the middle. Then on the bottom, we pull the oil pan and replace the rear main seal. This job is not super intense since we don't have to pull the transmission. We just have to pull that oil pan, and the rear main seal is a 2-piece unit in these 4-liter engines. So we go ahead and do the oil pan gasket and the rear main seal while we're in there. Now on this particular Cherokee, we found after we put it all back together that there was transmission fluid leaking from this general area. A lot of people would assume that would be this power steering pump, but in this case there's actually a fitting down on the radiator. There's a lot of fluid down in the bottom, residual, and this has a brand new transmission line, and there's a quick connect inside of that line. So these Cherokees and other Jeeps of this era have these small plastic quick connects, which you can see here on the fuel line. Now that also is true for the transmission lines, and in reality you really should be replacing these quick connects every time you pull one of these lines, but unfortunately they're a little bit difficult to source if you don't know what you're looking for. In the case of this transmission line that we replaced, which is right here, down in the throat of this female end of the quick connect, there's a set of small O-rings, and after a lot of jostling back and forth, probably by the last person who worked on it, maybe they replaced the radiator, maybe they just replaced this line. In any case, these O-rings got crooked, causing it to leak. So there's really no reliable way to replace these O-rings. They're so deep, they're like all the way back here on this line. We just go ahead and replace the whole line because typically they're not too good. And while we're at it, we put brand new quick connects. So I'll show you those now. So if you happen to be working on one of these, there are two different common part numbers. There's the 800 005 and the 800 006. Difference between these two part numbers is the size line that they fit on. 005 fits a 5/16 line, 006 fits a 3/8 line. These clips are the replacement for every plastic connector, quick connector on this era Jeep, and probably other ones as well, but I can guarantee for these, they definitely work for that. So if you go to your local parts guy and you ask him for those quick connects and he can't figure out what to give you, that's what you need. If you're getting one of these Cherokees, you're gonna have to familiarize yourself with replacing U-joints. Very often I work on these and there's at least 3 bad U-joints in it that have to end up getting replaced. So in total on these vehicles, you got one at each wheel, so that's two. You've got a front drive shaft that contains 1, 2, 3 in the front, and then 2, 1, and 2 in the rear drive shaft. So in total, you got 2, 5, 7 U-joints in this vehicle. And of course, you know, they never all go bad at once. They, you know, you fix one, and then as soon as you fix one, you get to go and chase it and fix another one, and it just goes on and on like so. So yeah, definitely familiarize yourself with how to replace U-joints. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video, but there's plenty of other ones. One piece of advice I will give you is I have absolutely zero luck with U-joints for Jeeps that are not Spicer. So Spicer is the parent company of Dana, the company that makes the front axle in this vehicle. They also make the rear axles for a lot of TJs and YJs and stuff like that. And even my JL has a Dana axle, which is really a Spicer axle. So you really want to do that. Another thing, this one doesn't have that problem, but one thing that I do see a lot with the Chrysler 8 1/4 axles is this seal here. It's called a pinion seal. Basically, it's really easy to replace. You just drop your drive shaft down, take these straps off, just drop that down. There's a big nut. You'll probably want an impact wrench to pull that nut. You pull that nut off, and you pull this whole yoke out, and then there's a seal here. Now this one has a Dana 35 axle, as you can see. So this one is not so prone to that leaking, but it definitely is an issue with the Chrysler axles that I've dealt with. So familiarize yourself with that. Now, if you have a lifted Cherokee, you're gonna want to replace this tail section with what's called a slip yoke eliminator, because the pinion angles of these systems, when they're lifted, this does not have an incredibly long drive shaft. As you can see, it doesn't have very far to go before it'll just drop this drive shaft out. So what it'll do is at least eliminate this slip yoke here, so you don't just drop it out on the trail and pour transmission fluid out the back end of it, out of the back of the transfer case. So just a couple of things you might want to handle. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have an older model, I believe it has to be a 96 or older, but I'm sure somebody will come out of the woodwork and correct me on that. They have these vacuum center axle disconnects, and they have issues. This one has an issue where it doesn't function at all. So we can already see a problem here. Hopefully you can see it in the camera. There's a missing line here. Where's that line? I don't know, but it's not there. So right now, four-wheel drive doesn't work in this, and I don't know where the line went because this is a customer vehicle. I don't know what happened to the line that's supposed to be there. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about getting one of these. You may want to swap the whole axle for a newer axle that does not have this, or there's kits that can make this a cable unit, replacing this box and making it so it operates off a cable inside the vehicle. Either way would be fine. You could also keep this axle and just put a straight shaft through there. I think you gotta change a couple seals in it, but other than that, that's totally fine to do as well. Last point we need to address is just the general strength of all the components in this front end. Now, if you just plan on going up to like maybe a 31 at the most, you're totally fine. But if you're going 33, 35 or bigger than that, you probably just want to go ahead and swap this out for at least a Dana 44 axle, maybe even a Dana 60 if you can put that in the budget. Even with the Dana 44, you're going to want to trust this because you have no idea how often I replace these axles because they're bent. It happens really often. A lot of times I don't even get to replace them because people can't afford it and they end up scrapping the whole thing. Now, these axles are not difficult to replace. You can definitely replace it in your yard. I've done it on my back plenty of times in just a few short hours. So yeah, that's not that big of a deal. Sourcing the axle can be kind of difficult, but I get these axles without the vacuum disconnect, which is the one you want, for about $150 to $200. So not too terrible. Other things with this Dana 30, as you can see, even with this one, hopefully the camera picks it up, definitely has an oil leak in that seal. Customer probably won't do that. I don't think that's quite in his budget right now. But yeah, that's pretty much what's there. If you get a little bit of death wobble, you know, the ball joints in these are pretty weak. So, you know, if you get death wobble, a lot of people spend a lot of money chasing death wobble in these, replacing all these components when it could have been fixed with a ball joint, or this track bar has a ball joint sort of in it too, a ball and socket joint. Placing those kind of components can get rid of death wobble. Replacing that steering stabilizer can help. But sometimes it just comes down to you need a beefier tie rod or drag link, and that's helped too for some reason. You would think, well, if it didn't have it before, why does it have it now? Who knows, but sometimes just beefing that up. I've also had a Grand Cherokee, a ZJ, which is pretty much the same thing as this, that had a wallowed out pitman arm. So basically the pitman arm was shaking on its threads, and that caused a hell of a wobble for sure. So there's a couple of things you can look for if you get one of these and it starts shaking. But yeah, Jeeps are notorious for just wobbling straight down the road. Now, the biggest thing that most of you guys are gonna have to watch out for before you even buy one of these is rust. Now the ones you really gotta watch out for are ones like this, which have these fender flares. Now if water and rust is gonna accumulate without anybody knowing to do anything about it, it's gonna be behind one of these flares. So keep that in mind. The other place, which this one actually isn't too bad, is up in these wheel wells. So if you live up north in a place where they salt the roads, these wheel wells have a lip underneath, and the salt snow slush accumulates here and packs in and just rusts it. Once that rust starts, it just moves all the way through the wheel wells. And same thing above these leaf spring perches. I have another Cherokee outside I can show you that is really. So as you can see, this is the other Cherokee I have. This one's outside. So you can see rust through here all the way through to the ground. You can see, you know, this is a unibody vehicle, but it's still got a little stamping of a frame here. Previous owner tried to fix this with flex tape, and obviously that's not ideal. We'll come around here. This door does not open from the outside, so I have to go ahead and do this. Push inside, latch. So yeah, this spot really concerns me here. Down in this corner, it just kind of rusted out, and that's where your leaf spring perch is. So not good. Definitely something you want to look out for. Luckily this one doesn't seem to have ever had fender flares on it, plus the fenders were cut for bigger tires. This one's lifted on 35s. And just one final thing to talk about with just internal engine issues with the Jeep 4-liter in general. If you go out and you're looking at one for sale and it's dumping oil out the back, or if it just overheats for no reason, you should go without saying you should probably stay away from it unless you have another motor ready to swap in and you have those skills, because it'll quickly turn into a situation where it costs you more to fix it than it's really worth. Not uncommon to see a blown head gasket on one of these things. Not uncommon to see cracked blocks in the back, or even there's a freeze plug in the back of the cylinder head that you can't replace with the engine in the vehicle. So unless you already have those skills, in which case you probably wouldn't even bother looking at this, just find another one, because if you find one that runs good to start off with, you're gonna be better off because you won't spend as much money. Now if you already have one that has that issue, it's a different situation because you already own it. But if you can find one, pay a little bit extra for one that doesn't have those kind of issues. People will tell you, oh, it's a simple rear main seal. Listen, the rear main seal does not pour oil out the back of the motor. I've learned that the hard way myself, okay? It's something else, a crack, something. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe for more, and I'll catch everyone in the next one.